Commander Jake Sullivan pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation deck. Outside, stars danced in the darkness like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. The nebula ahead glowed with soft purple and blue colors that reminded him of his wife's favorite painting back on Earth. But Jake barely noticed the beauty anymore. His mind was busy with reports, mission plans, and the 100 different problems that came with commanding a deep space exploration ship. The sound of small feet running across the metal floor made him turn around. His 3-year-old daughter, Emma, came rushing toward him, her blonde pigtails bouncing with each step. She wore the tiny yellow dress that her grandmother had sent from Earth, and her face was bright with excitement. "Daddy, Daddy," Emma called out, reaching up with both arms. Jake smiled and picked her up, settling her on his hip. She was getting heavier every day, but he loved holding her close. "What is it, little star?" Jake asked, using the nickname he had given her when she was born. Emma pointed at the big window with one small finger. "Look at all the pretty colors, Daddy. They're like the crayons in my box." Jake followed her gaze to the nebula. Through Emma's eyes, he saw it differently. The swirling gases did look like someone had taken giant crayons and painted across the sky. He had been so focused on navigation charts and fuel consumption that he had forgotten to actually look at what they were flying through. "You're right, Emma. It is very pretty." Behind them, the observation deck was full of people. Today was family day on the ship, which happened once every month. Crew members who had families aboard could spend time together without work duties. Children ran between the adults, playing games and laughing. Their voices echoed off the metal walls and mixed with the low hum of the ship's engines. Jake watched as his chief engineer, Lisa Hayes, showed her 6-year-old son how the ship's artificial gravity worked by dropping a ball and catching it. Nearby, Dr. Peter Kim sat on the floor with his twin daughters, reading them a story about brave space explorers. The scene was peaceful and normal, but Jake felt something was missing. Emma wiggled in his arms until he set her down on the floor. She ran to the window and pressed both hands against the glass, leaving small handprints on the surface. "Daddy," she said without turning around, "do you know beautiful things?" The question hit Jake like a physical blow. He had expected her to ask about the stars or the colors outside. He had prepared himself for questions about why they lived on a spaceship instead of a house with a yard. But this question was different. It was simple, but it felt huge at the same time. "What do you mean, Emma?" Jake asked, kneeling down beside her. Emma looked up at him with her big blue eyes, the same color as her mother's. Mrs. Cooper was teaching U.S. about Earth today. She showed us pictures of flowers and trees and oceans. She said there are beautiful things everywhere. "But you're always working, Daddy. Do you know about beautiful things too?" Jake felt his chest tighten. Emma was talking about Karolina Cooper, the ship's teacher who ran the small school for the children on board. Jake realized that while he had been consumed with his duties as commander, his daughter had been learning about the world beyond duty reports and maintenance schedules. He looked around the observation deck with new eyes. There was Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sitting with her teenage nephew, pointing out different star formations and telling him stories about the worlds they had visited. There was Captain Steve Martinez playing a card game with his elderly father, both men laughing at some private joke. There was Dr. Alex Thompson sketching the nebula in a small notebook while his wife read over his shoulder. These were beautiful things too, Jake realized. The laughter of children, the patience of teachers, the love between family members. He had been so focused on keeping everyone safe and on mission that he had stopped seeing the life happening all around him. "I used to know about beautiful things," Jake said slowly. "When I was younger, before I became a commander, I used to paint pictures. I would sit for hours trying to capture the way sunlight looked on water or how clouds moved across the sky. Emma's face lit up. You can paint? Like the pictures in my books? I could once, but I stopped when I got busy with work. Emma took his large hand in both of her small ones. Will you show me? Will you paint the pretty colors outside? Jake looked at his daughter's hopeful face and felt something break open inside his chest. When had he become the kind of person who was too busy for beauty? When had duty become more important than wonder? I don't have any paints on the ship, Emma. We can ask Mrs. Cooper. She has lots of art things for school. Before Jake could answer, Emma was already running across the deck toward Karolina Cooper. Jake watched his daughter explain something to the teacher with animated gestures and excited words. Karolina looked over at Jake with a smile and nodded. A few minutes later, Emma came back carrying a small set of watercolors and a pad of paper. Mrs. Cooper says I can borrow these if you help me use them right. Jake took the art supplies and felt their familiar weight in his hands. It had been more than 10 years since he had held a paintbrush. His fingers remembered the shape of the handle, but his mind was full of doubts. What if I'm not good anymore? He asked Emma. Emma shrugged. Mrs. Cooper says the best part about making art is not being perfect. She says it's about showing how things make you feel inside. Jake set up the paper on a nearby table and opened the small box of paints. Emma climbed onto a chair next to him and watched with intense concentration as he mixed blue and purple on the palette. Tell me what you see when you look out there, Jake said, pointing at the nebula. Emma studied the swirling colors for a long moment. I see a place where dreams live, she said finally. Like maybe there are sleeping princesses in there, and they're dreaming about all the places they want to visit. Jake smiled and began to paint. His first strokes were hesitant and clumsy, but Emma's words filled his mind with images. He painted swirling clouds that looked like sleeping figures. He added tiny dots of light that could be dreams taking flight. He painted not just what he saw, but what Emma's imagination had shown him. As he worked, other people on the deck began to gather around. They watched quietly as Jake's brush brought the nebula to life on paper. But more than that, they watched as a father and daughter shared something beautiful together. When Jake finished, Emma clapped her hands together. It's perfect, Daddy. You do know beautiful things. Jake looked at his daughter and realized she was right. He had always known about beautiful things. He had just forgotten to look for them. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez wiped sweat from her forehead as she walked across the rocky ground of planet Kepler 442b. The sun here was smaller than Earth's sun, but it still made the day hot enough to make her uniform stick to her skin. She carried a scanner in one hand and a sample collection bag in the other. Her job was simple but important. Catalog everything on this planet so the science team could decide if humans could live here. Behind her, 3 other crew members from the ship, spread out across the valley. They had been working for 6 hours, taking pictures, collecting rocks, and testing the air and water. So far, everything looked normal for a dead planet. No plants, no animals, just rocks and dust under a pale orange sky. Amy stopped at a ridge and looked back at where they had started. In the distance, she could see the landing shuttle that had brought them down from the ship. But something was different about the area around the shuttle. She raised her binoculars and looked closer. The ground around the shuttle was green. Amy blinked hard and looked again. She had been walking on gray rocks and red dirt all morning. There were no plants anywhere on this planet. The science team had been very clear about that. But through her binoculars, she could definitely see green plants growing in a circle around their shuttle. She grabbed her radio. Tony, this is Amy. Are you seeing anything strange near the landing site? Tony Martinez's voice crackled through the speaker. Strange how? I'm about a mile east of you, still seeing nothing but rocks. Look toward the shuttle with your binoculars. Tell me what you see around it." There was silence for a few minutes. Then Tony's voice came back, sounding confused. "Amy, there are plants growing around our shuttle. That's impossible. We scanned this whole area yesterday. There was nothing living here." Amy started walking quickly back toward the shuttle. Her heart was beating fast. She had been on dozens of planetary surveys, and she had never seen anything like this. Plants did not just appear overnight, especially not on dead planets. As she got closer, the impossible became undeniable. Green grass covered the ground in a perfect circle around their shuttle. Small flowers had sprouted between the grass blades. Even stranger, she could see tiny insects flying from flower to flower. Where had they come from? The other 3 crew members reached the shuttle at the same time Amy did. They all stood at the edge of the green circle, staring. "This has to be some kind of mistake," said Dr. Peter Kim, the team's biologist. "We tested the soil here yesterday. It was completely sterile. Nothing could grow in it." "Well, something is growing in it now," said Lisa Hayes, kneeling down to touch the grass. "And it feels real to me." Amy opened her scanner and pointed it at the green area. The readings made her eyes go wide. The soil inside this circle has completely different chemical properties than the soil outside it. Yesterday, the pH was 8.2, which is too basic for most plants. Now it's reading 6.8, which is perfect for growing things. Tony was walking slowly around the edge of the circle. The circle is exactly 50 meters across. That's about the same distance as the range of our portable life support system. Dr. Kim pulled out his own scanner and started taking readings. "Amy, you need to see this. The oxygen levels inside the circle are higher than outside. And the soil isn't just better for plants. It's full of nutrients that weren't here yesterday. It's like someone dumped a year's worth of fertilizer on this spot." Amy felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm air. How is that possible? "I don't know," Dr. Kim said, "but I want to collect samples from inside and outside the circle. We need to figure out what happened here." They spent the next 2 hours collecting soil, plant samples, and even catching some of the insects that had appeared. Amy kept checking her scanner, hoping the readings would go back to normal, but they stayed the same. The area around their shuttle had somehow transformed from a dead zone into a small garden dot. As they prepared to return to the ship, Lisa made another discovery. "Look at this," she called out, pointing to a bare patch of ground just outside the green circle. "There are tiny green shoots starting to come up here too. The circle is getting bigger." Amy knelt down next to Lisa and saw she was right. Baby plants were pushing up through the soil, extending the green area by several inches. Whatever was happening was still happening. Back on the ship, Amy stood in the science lab watching Dr. Kim examine their samples under a microscope. She had already sent her report to Commander Sullivan, but she knew he would want more answers than she could give him. "This is incredible," Dr. Kim said, looking up from his microscope. "The soil from inside the circle is full of beneficial bacteria and fungi that help plants grow. These microorganisms weren't in our samples from yesterday. It's like they just appeared out of nowhere." "That's impossible," Amy said. "Bacteria don't just appear. I know it's impossible, but I'm looking at the evidence right here. And there's something else strange. The genetic material of these plants, it's not from any known species, but it's also not completely alien. It's like someone took Earth plants and changed them just enough to survive on this planet." Amy felt her stomach tighten. "Are you saying someone or something put these plants here?" "I don't know what I'm saying. I just know that what we found today breaks every rule of biology that I know." The lab door opened, and Commander Sullivan walked in with Captain Steve Martinez. Amy could see the concern on both their faces. "I read your report," the commander said. Is it possible that we brought something with us that caused this? Some kind of contamination from the ship? Dr. Kim shook his head. Our shuttle has the same sterilization protocols as always. And even if we did bring some seeds or bacteria, they couldn't have worked this fast. What we saw today would normally take months or years to happen. Captain Martinez crossed his arms. So what are you telling us? That this planet somehow knew. We were coming and decided to grow us a welcome garden? The question was meant to be sarcastic, but nobody laughed. Amy looked at the sample containers on the lab table and felt like they were looking at something much bigger than anyone realized. I want to go back tomorrow, Amy said. I want to see how much bigger the circle has gotten. And I want to set cameras to watch what happens. Commander Sullivan nodded. Do it, but I want you to be very careful down there. If something is causing these changes, we need to know what it is and whether it's dangerous. That night, Amy lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. She kept thinking about Emma's question to her father about beautiful things. The little girl had been talking about art and flowers and pretty colors. But what if she had been asking about something bigger? What if there were beautiful things happening in the universe that adults were too busy to notice? Amy fell asleep, thinking about green circles growing on dead planets and wondering what other impossible beautiful things might be waiting for them among the stars. The emergency message from Centauri Research Station came through at 3 a.m, ship time. Commander Jake Sullivan was pulled from sleep by the urgent beeping of his personal communicator. He rolled out of bed, careful not to wake his wife Sarah, and stumbled to his desk. This is Commander Sullivan, he said into the device. The voice that came back was shaky and scared. Commander, this is Dr. Alex Thompson at Centauri Station. We need to talk to you immediately. It's about what Lieutenant Rodriguez found on Kepler 442b. Jake felt suddenly awake. Dr. Thompson? I thought you were doing mineral surveys out there. What do you know about Amy's discovery? More than you might think. Can you meet me on a secure channel in 10 minutes? And Commander, bring Dr. Kim and Lieutenant Rodriguez with you. They need to hear this too. 20 minutes later, Jake sat in the ship's secure communication room with Amy and Dr. Kim. On the big screen in front of them, Dr. Thompson's face looked tired and worried. Behind him, they could see the metal walls of the research station and other scientists working at computers. What I'm about to tell you has to stay secret for now, Dr. Thompson said. My team has been studying something we call the human effect for the past 8 months. We didn't report it because we were afraid of what might happen if the wrong people found out. Amy leaned forward in her chair. The human effect? What does that mean? Dr. Thompson looked around his station, then back. At the screen. Wherever humans live for more than a few weeks, the environment changes. Dead planets start growing plants. Sick ecosystems get healthy again. Even the weather gets better. We've documented it on 12 different worlds now. Dr. Kim shook his head. That's impossible. Humans don't have any special powers. We're just another species. That's what we thought too, Dr. Thompson said. But the evidence is overwhelming. Let me show you something. The screen changed to show a video recording. Jake could see a barren landscape covered in gray rocks and strange purple sand. The sky was dark and cloudy. This is Centauri 7 taken 6 months ago when our team first arrived. The planet was completely dead. No plants, no animals, nothing. The atmosphere was toxic, and the soil couldn't support any kind of life. The video changed to show the same landscape, but now it was completely different. Green plants covered the ground. Strange blue flowers grew between the rocks. The sky was clearer, and Jake could even see small flying creatures moving between the plants. This is the same spot, taken last week. In 6 months, a dead world has become a living one. And the only thing that changed was that 30 humans started living there. Amy felt her heart racing. This is exactly what happened on Kepler 442b, but much faster. Our changes happened in one day. Dr. Thompson nodded. The speed depends on several factors. Emotional intensity is the biggest one. When humans are happy, excited, or experiencing strong positive emotions, the effect is much stronger. Children seem to create the most powerful changes. Jake thought about Emma and her innocent wonder at the beautiful colors in space. You're saying that children can change entire planets just by being there? Not just by being there, by feeling things. Wonder, joy, love, curiosity, these emotions seem to create some kind of energy field that affects the environment around us. We've measured quantum fluctuations that match human brain wave patterns. When people are happy or amazed by something beautiful, the effect gets stronger. Dr. Kim was taking notes as fast as he could write. How far does this effect reach? It varies, but usually about 50 to 100 meters from where humans spend most of their time. That's why Lieutenant Rodriguez found a perfect circle around your shuttle. The effect radiates out from human activity. The screen changed again to show charts and graphs that Jake didn't understand. Dr. Thompson continued explaining. We think it works through quantum entanglement at the cellular level. Human consciousness, especially when experiencing positive emotions, creates energy patterns that somehow encourage life and growth. It's like our brains are broadcasting a signal that says grow, live, be healthy to everything around us. Amy was staring at the data on the screen. Why haven't we noticed this before? Humans have been in space for over a century because most space stations and ships are sterile environments. The effect needs organic matter to work with, soil, water, basic chemical elements. Also, most space missions are focused on work and survival, not on wonder and beauty. The stronger the positive emotions, the stronger the effect. Jake felt a chill as he remembered Emma's painting session 2 days ago. She had been filled with joy and wonder while they painted the nebula. Together, if Dr. Thompson was right, Emma's happiness might have been creating changes all around them. Dr. Thompson, is this effect dangerous? Could it cause problems? The scientist shook his head. As far as we can tell, it only promotes healthy growth. It doesn't create diseases or harmful organisms. It's like it knows the difference between life that helps and life that hurts. But there's something else you need to know. Dr. Thompson's face became very serious. We think the Thrakari Empire has found out about this. 3 weeks ago, they sent ships to investigate one of our test sites. They destroyed the research station and killed everyone there. We think they see the human effect as a threat to their way of life. Dr. Kim looked up from his notes. Why would they see it as a threat? The Thrakari Empire is built on taking resources from planets and leaving them dead. If humans can turn dead worlds into living ones, it threatens their entire economic system. Worse, if other species learn that humans can do this, they might start seeing us as too dangerous to leave alone. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. His daughter and every other human child might be carrying a power that could change the galaxy, but it could also make them targets. What do you recommend we do? Jake asked. Dr. Thompson looked around his station again, then back at the screen. Keep studying it, but keep it quiet. We need to understand how it works before anyone else finds out. And Commander, watch your daughter carefully. Children with strong imaginations and emotional responses create the most powerful effects. She might be the key to understanding all of this. After the communication ended, Jake sat quietly with Amy and Dr. Kim. None of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, Amy broke the silence. If this is real, it changes everything. We're not just explorers anymore. We're gardeners. Dr. Kim closed his notebook. The question is, what happens when the rest of the galaxy finds out that humans can bring dead worlds back to life? Jake thought about Emma's question about beautiful things and realized she might have been asking about something much bigger than any of them had. Beautiful things weren't just art and flowers. They were the power to create life itself. The attack on New Eden came without warning. Captain Steve Martinez was drinking coffee in his small kitchen when the emergency alarms started screaming across the farming colony. Through his window, he could see massive gray ships descending from the sky like metal storms. Their hulls were covered in sharp spikes and weapon ports that glowed with angry red light. Steve grabbed his emergency radio and ran outside. All around him, colonists were pouring out of their homes, looking up at the sky with fear and confusion. These were farmers and teachers and shop owners, not soldiers. They had come to New Eden to grow food and raise their families in peace. This is Captain Martinez to all colonists, Steve shouted into his radio. Get to the emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. The first energy blast hit the ground 50 meters from Steve's house. The explosion threw dirt and rocks in two. The air and left a smoking crater where the Johnson family's vegetable garden had been growing that morning. Steve felt the heat wash over his face as he ran toward the school building where most of the children were supposed to gather during emergencies. Above them, the Thrakari ships moved in perfect formation. Steve had heard about the Thrakari Empire, but had never seen their ships up close. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built, shaped like giant spears with wings. The metal was dark gray and seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. At the school, Steve found chaos. Karen White, the head teacher, was trying to get 60 children into the underground shelter while parents ran around looking for their kids. The youngest children were crying, and the older ones were asking questions that nobody could answer. Mrs. White, Steve called out. How many children are still missing? Karen's face was pale but determined. 12 are still unaccounted for. The Murphy twins were playing in the east field, and little Danny Chun was helping his grandfather in the greenhouse. Another explosion shook the building. Through the windows, Steve could see Thrakari soldiers dropping from their ships on metal cables. They were tall and covered in scales, with 4 arms each and faces that looked like angry lizards. They carried weapons that fired bolts of green energy. Everyone into the shelter now. Steve ordered, Karen, get these kids underground. I'm going to find the missing children. Steve ran outside into what had become a war zone. The Thrakari soldiers were moving through the colony systematically, destroying everything they found. They weren't just attacking people. They were burning crops, smashing water systems, and pouring some kind of chemical on the soil that made it smoke and turn black. Steve found the Murphy twins hiding behind their family's barn. The 8-year-old boy and girl were holding hands and shaking with fear. It's okay, Steve told them, picking them up. I'm going to get you somewhere safe. As he carried the children toward the school, Steve heard one of the Thrakari soldiers speaking into a communication device. The voice was harsh and mechanical, but Steve's translator allowed him to understand the words. Contamination levels are severe in this sector. The human disease has spread throughout the soil and water systems. Initiating full sterilization protocol. Steve realized with horror that the Thrakari weren't just attacking the colony. They were trying to destroy every sign of life that humans had created on New Eden. The beautiful farms and gardens that had taken years to grow were being turned back into dead dirt. He reached the school just as another wave of Thrakari ships arrived. These were smaller, but carried different weapons. Instead of explosive energy, they sprayed a gray mist that killed plants instantly. Steve watched helplessly as the colony's main food gardens withered and died in seconds in the underground shelter. Karen White was trying to keep 60 frightened children calm, while explosions shook dust from the ceiling above them. The shelter had been built to protect against storms, not military attacks. She knew it wouldn't hold for long against Thrakari weapons. "Mrs. White," whispered Emma Sullivan, Commander Jake's daughter, "why are the bad men hurting our flowers?" Karen knelt down next to the 4-year-old girl. Even in the dim emergency lighting, she could see that Emma's eyes were full of tears, but also something else, anger. Not the kind of anger that wanted to hurt someone, but the kind that wanted to protect something precious. "I don't know, sweetie. Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. But we made the flowers grow because we love them." Emma said, "Daddy showed me how our feelings can make beautiful things happen. Why would anyone want to stop that?" Karen felt something strange happening in the shelter. The other children were gathering around Emma, listening to her words. As they did, the air seemed to change. It felt warmer and somehow more alive down above. Ground, Steve had found Danny Chun and was carrying him toward the shelter when he noticed something impossible. Where Emma and the other children had played yesterday, green shoots were pushing up through the black chemical the Thrakari had sprayed on the ground. The new plants weren't just surviving the Thrakari poison. They were transforming it into rich, dark soil. A Thrakari soldier spotted Steve and raised his weapon. But before he could fire, the ground under his feet began to crack. Thick vines erupted from the soil and wrapped around the soldier's legs. The vines weren't trying to hurt him, but they held him firmly in place. Steve stared in amazement as similar scenes played out across the colony. Everywhere the Thrakari had tried to destroy life, new life was growing back faster and stronger. Trees sprouted from burned fields. Flowers bloomed in the craters left by energy weapons. Even the air seemed cleaner and fresher in the shelter. Emma stood up and placed her small hands on the concrete walls. "Don't be sad," she told the other children. "Our home wants to be beautiful. We just have to help it remember how." The children joined hands around Emma, and Karen felt the change, spreading outward from them like ripples in a pond. Above their heads, she could hear the sounds of battle changing. The Thrakari weapons were still firing, but now there were other sounds. The rustle of leaves, the buzz of insects, the whisper of wind through grass. Captain Steve Martinez made it to the shelter entrance, just as the ground around it burst into bloom. Flowers covered the concrete walls, and fruit trees grew tall enough to hide the building from Thrakari ships. As he climbed down into the shelter, he could hear the enemy soldiers shouting in confusion and fear. Inside, he found the children sitting in a circle around Emma Sullivan, their eyes closed and their faces peaceful. Karen White stood watching, them with tears streaming down her cheeks. "What's happening up there?" she whispered to Steve. Steve looked at Emma and the other children, then back at Karen. "I think," he said slowly, "our kids are teaching this planet how to fight back." Above them, New Eden was transforming itself into something the Thrakari had never seen before, a world that refused to die. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council was unlike anything Ambassador Claire Foster had ever seen. Representatives from 47 different species filled the massive chamber on the neutral station of Haven Prime. The air was thick with tension as delegates argued in dozens of different languages, while their translators worked overtime. Claire sat at the human delegation table, watching as the debate grew more heated by the minute. On one side of the chamber, the insectoid Veltar delegates clicked and buzzed angrily. Their queen, Zero, had sent a clear message. Humans were an ecological threat that needed to be contained. On the other side, the crystalline resonari hummed in harmonious tones, their speaker Harmonic 7 defending humanity's right to exist freely. "The evidence is undeniable," declared Veltar Prime Minister Clix 9, his forearms gesturing wildly. Human presence destabilizes entire planetary ecosystems. They are spreading across the galaxy like a biological weapon, changing worlds without permission or control. Claire stood up to respond, but before she could speak, Harmonic Seven's crystal body began to glow with soft blue light. When the Resonari spoke, their voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Honored delegates, the Resonari have studied human emotional patterns for many cycles. What the Veltar call destruction, we recognize as creation. Humans do not damage worlds, they heal them. A new voice cut through the debate. It was harsh and mechanical, coming from the Thrakari ambassador who had just entered the chamber. Admiral Zextar was a massive creature, even by Thrakari standards. His scales were black as space, and his forearms ended in claws that could crush metal. The Thrakari Empire has seen enough of human contamination, Zextar announced. We have lost 3 colony worlds to this spreading plague. Planets that fed our people for generations are now useless, covered in alien growth that serves no purpose except to waste resources. Claire felt her anger rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. Ambassador Zextar, those worlds weren't feeding your people. They were strip-mined until nothing could grow there. If life has returned to them, that should be celebrated, not feared. Life that serves no purpose is chaos, Zextar replied. The Thrakari bring order to the galaxy. We take what is needed and leave the rest for other uses. Human contamination makes this impossible. Queen Zira's translator spoke for her in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. The Veltar colonies have also been affected. Our carefully maintained agricultural systems are being overrun by uncontrolled plant growth. Human emotional radiation is disrupting thousands of years of biological planning. Claire looked around the chamber and saw that more delegates were nodding in agreement with the Veltar and Thrakari. Fear was spreading faster than understanding. What you call disruption, we call healing, Claire said, raising her voice to be heard. The Resonari understand this. Why can't the rest of you see that making dead worlds alive again is a good thing? Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication system crackled to life. The voice that came through belonged to Commander Jake Sullivan, speaking from his ship near the edge of Coalition space. Council delegates, this is Commander Sullivan of the exploration vessel Horizon's Edge. I'm requesting permission to present evidence that might change your understanding of what humans can do. Admiral Zextar's eyes glowed red with anger. We will not listen to more human lies and propaganda. But Harmonic 7 began to glow brighter, their crystalline form resonating with musical tones. The Resonari request that the human commander be heard. Truth serves all species better than fear. The council president, a tall being from the neutral Centauri Republic, called for order. Commander Sullivan, you have 5 minutes to present your evidence. The main display screen activated, showing Jake's face along with what looked like a child's drawing. Claire could see that someone very young had painted swirling colors and shapes that looked like the nebula outside the station. 3 days ago, my 4-year-old daughter asked me if I knew about beautiful things, Jake began, while she painted. This picture of the nebula we were traveling through, something extraordinary happened. Her joy and wonder created a quantum field effect that we're still trying to understand. The screen changed to show scientific readings and charts. Our sensors detected massive positive changes in the space around our ship. Radiation levels dropped, electromagnetic interference cleared, and even our ship's systems began running more efficiently. But the most amazing change was in the nebula itself. The display showed before and after images of the nebula. In the first image, it looked like a normal cloud of gas and dust. In the second image, taken after Emma's painting session, the nebula had formed into beautiful spiral patterns that looked almost like artwork. A child's happiness and sense of wonder literally transformed the space around us, Jake continued. Not in a dangerous way, but in a way that created more beauty and harmony. This is what humans do. We don't contaminate or destroy. We inspire growth and create beauty wherever we go. Queen Zira's translator spoke again, sounding less certain than before. The Veltar have observed unusual patterns in space near human colonies. We assumed they were signs of contamination. They're signs of life reaching its full potential, Jake replied. What looks like chaos to you might actually be the universe expressing its own creativity. On the screen, the image changed to show Emma herself, now sitting in front of the nebula window with her paint box. She was looking directly at the camera with her big blue eyes. I want to ask you the same question my daughter asked me, Jake said. Do you know beautiful things? Because Emma has shown me that the most beautiful thing in the universe isn't what we take or control. It's what we choose to create and share. The chamber fell silent as delegates stared at the image of the human child. Claire could see that something was changing in their faces. Even some of the Veltar had stopped their angry clicking. Dr. Ben Parker's voice came through the communication system. Council delegates, I've been studying the human effect for months. I believe we could use it to heal worlds that have been damaged by war and overmining. Instead of seeing humans as a threat, we could work with them to restore life to dead planets throughout the galaxy. Harmonic 7's crystal body pulsed with bright light. The Resonare propose a new approach. Let us study this human gift together. Let us learn how to use it to benefit all species, not just humans. But Admiral Zextar was already standing up, his massive form towering over the other delegates. The Thrakari Empire will never accept this contamination. If the Coalition chooses to embrace this chaos, we will act alone to protect the galaxy from human influence. As Zextar left the chamber, Claire felt a chill run through her. The galaxy was splitting apart over the question of whether humanity's gift was a blessing or a curse. On the screen, Emma Sullivan continued to paint, unaware that her innocent question about beautiful things had started a conflict that would determine the future of human civilization among the stars. Emma Sullivan pressed her small face against the observation deck window and pointed at the stars with excitement. Behind her, the crew of the Horizon's Edge prepared for what might be their final battle. Through the thick glass, she could see the massive Thrakari war fleet approaching Earth like a dark storm cloud made of metal and death. Addie, look at all the pretty ships, Emma said, not understanding that the approaching vessels meant to destroy her home. They look like big metal flowers with all those spiky parts. Commander Jake Sullivan knelt down beside his daughter, his heart breaking at her innocence. Around them, the observation deck was crowded with families who had come to see Earth one last time before the battle began. Children played quietly, while their parents watched the enemy fleet with fear and sadness. Emma, sweetheart, those ships aren't here to visit, Jake said gently. The people inside them are scared of us. They think we're dangerous. Emma turned away from the window and looked up at her father with her big blue eyes. But we're not dangerous, Daddy. We just make beautiful things grow. Why would anyone be scared of that? Before Jake could answer, the ship's communication system crackled to life. Admiral Zextar's harsh voice filled the observation deck, speaking in heavily accented English so that all the humans could understand him. Humans of Earth, you have spread your contamination across too many worlds. The Thrakari Empire will cleanse the galaxy of your biological chaos. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Emma tilted her head like she was thinking hard about something. Daddy, the scary voice sounds very sad, like he's never seen anything pretty before. Jake felt something twist in his chest. Even facing destruction, his daughter could only see sadness instead of evil. You might be right, little star. Maybe he just needs someone to show him beautiful things. Around the observation deck, Other families were having similar conversations. Parents held their children close while trying to explain why someone would want to hurt them for making dead worlds come alive. The children asked questions that had no good answers not outside. The human defense fleet moved into position between Earth and the Thrakari ships. Jake could see Captain Steve Martinez's ship, the New Eden, flying alongside dozens of others. But everyone knew the human ships were smaller and weaker than the Thrakari war vessels. This wouldn't be a battle. It would be a slaughter. Emma tugged on Jake's uniform sleeve. "Daddy, can I paint the pretty lights outside? Like we did with the nebula?" Jake looked at his daughter and remembered how her joy had transformed space itself during their last painting session. Dr. Ben Parker had said that children's emotions created the strongest effects. But would it be enough to stop an entire war fleet? "Yes, Emma, I think that's exactly what we should do." Jake called out to the other families on the observation deck. "Everyone who has children, come over here. We're going to do something special." Within minutes, 30 children were gathered around the big window with paint boxes, crayons and paper that the adults had found throughout the ship. Emma sat in the center of the group, already mixing colors on her palette. "What should we paint?" asked 7-year-old Danny Chun, the boy who had been rescued from New Eden. Emma looked out at the approaching Thrakari fleet and smiled. "Let's paint what we want the scary ships to look like when they're not scary anymore." The children began to work, their young faces focused on their art. As they painted, something extraordinary began to happen. The quantum field around the ship started to change, just like it had during Emma's first painting session. But this time, the effect was much stronger because 30 children were creating together. Jake felt the change like a warm wind flowing through the observation deck. Other adults began to gather, drawn by something they couldn't name. Parents, grandparents, teachers, and crew members all stood watching as the children painted their vision of a beautiful universe. Outside, the space between the two fleets began to shimmer. Colors that had no name spread through the darkness, like aurora lights. The harsh metal of the Thrakari ships started to change, growing strange crystalline formations that sparkled in the starlight. On the lead Thrakari vessel, Admiral Zextar stared at his bridge monitors in confusion. His weapon systems were still functional, but something was happening to his ship's hull. Beautiful patterns of light were spreading across the metal like living art. "Admiral," his weapons officer reported, "we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations from the human fleet. But they're not using any weapons we recognize." "Then what are they doing?" Zextar demanded. Before anyone could answer, the bridges. Main screen flickered and showed the inside of the human observation deck. Zextar found himself looking at 30 human children sitting on the floor, painting pictures with bright colors. At the center of the group, a small girl with blonde hair was showing her painting to the camera. Emma's voice came through the speakers, clear and innocent. "Hi, scary ship people. I painted a picture of your ships when they're happy instead of angry. Do you want to see?" She held up her painting, and Zextar felt something he had never experienced before. The picture showed Thrakari ships covered, and flowers and vines with little windows where families could look out at the stars. Instead of weapons, the ships had gardens. Instead of armor, they had butterfly wings. "We know you're sad because you think we're dangerous," Emma continued. "But we just want to make pretty things grow. Look, I'll show you." The child placed her small hand on the window, and the quantum effect intensified. Throughout the Thrakari fleet, impossible things began to happen. Weapon ports transformed into flower beds. Engine exhausts became fountains of sparkling water. The cold metal walls inside the ships grew warm and soft, covered with plants that glowed with gentle light. Admiral Zextar looked around his bridge and saw his crew staring in wonder at the changes happening around them. One of his officers reached out to touch a vine that had grown across his control panel. The plant responded by blooming with flowers that smelled like the home world Zexstar had almost forgotten. "Admiral," his communications officer whispered, "I'm receiving a transmission from the human child." "Put it through," Zexstar said, his voice much quieter than before. Emma's face appeared on the screen again. "Do you like the pretty changes? My daddy says you're scared because you don't know about beautiful things. But I can teach you if you want to learn." Zexstar felt tears running down his scaled cheeks, the first tears he had cried in 50 years. He looked at Emma's innocent face and realized that everything his empire had taught him about strength and conquest was wrong. "Little human," he said softly, "what are these beautiful things you speak of?" Emma smiled, the same smile she had given her father when she first asked her question. "Beautiful things are everything that makes you happy to be alive. Like flowers, and songs and hugs, and painting pictures of your friends. Do you want to be friends?" Around the Admiral, his crew was experiencing beauty for the first time in their lives. They touched the growing plants, listened to the music that seemed to come from the walls themselves, and felt something warm spreading through their hearts. Zexstar looked at the human child on his screen and gave her the answer that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. "Yes, little one. We would very much like to learn about beautiful things." As the two fleets came together in space, no longer as enemies, but as students and teachers, Emma turned to her father with the satisfied look of a job well done. "See, Daddy? I told you everyone just needed to know about beautiful things." Jake hugged his daughter close and looked out at the impossible garden that space had become. Emma had been right from the beginning. The most beautiful thing in the universe wasn't what you took from it, but what you chose to give back.